Thank you so much for coming. We will confess that we were a little bit, will anybody come? I knew Dan would come because Dan works with me. I was like, this is really lovely to see.
I also knew my husband would come.
Thanks for that, Charlie.
I didn't know that. That's why I was excited about the 15s. Yeah. I got it now. So thank you very much. You're all very welcome to this, what is going to be a really conversational session that we've called Across the Water, which those of you who are from across the water, the other across the water, will know that that's how we Northern Irish people refer to the rest of the UK. But it's kind of, when we're over here, then over there is across the water. It is very conversational. We're each going to speak a little bit. And then we've got some, you'll see you've got some Post-its there. You can never get away without a Post-it in a do like this. We've got some kind of questions for you, and then we're hoping just to have a chat with you. So hopefully that feels all right. Anyone, and there's a few of you here who have worked with me, know that I'm always banging on about not forgetting Northern Ireland, about the need to understand Northern Ireland, about being interested in Northern Ireland, and not from a, I guess, like a please come and save us point of view, but like there's really cool stuff happening. It's really complicated. There's really difficult stuff, of course, but there's lots of really interesting, dynamic, fun crack happening in Northern Ireland. It was Helen's brilliant idea to do this with buns, and the reason, yes.
Come on.
The many reasons for that, apart from just being buns are amazing, will come up through the session. So we wanted to just say, before we really kick off, we've kind of structured this around three topics of enterprise, land and community. And we kind of took that from a really interesting piece of work by Cooperative Alternatives, which is the Northern Ireland cooperative infrastructure organisation. Really is one woman, Tiziana O'Hara, some of you might know. Did a brilliant report called Cultivating Community Farming, which is looking at community farming in Northern Ireland and all of the different values and all of the different resource and all of the different things that brings to food systems and food sector in Northern Ireland. And so we just thought we'd lift those topics because we may as well reuse good stuff. We're loosely going to speak to one of those topics each, but because we all wear a lot of hats, as lots of you do, I guess, as well, and also because we're all very excitable Northern Irish people, there's absolutely no way we'll be able to just stick to speaking about our one thing. So it's going to be fluid. That's what I'm saying. So I'm here with Helen Keys and Cormac Dolan, and it is a massive privilege for me to be anywhere with these guys because they're mega and good crack as well. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'll just say a very quick bit about myself. So I am Beth Bell. Many hats, as I said. So I work with the Food Ethics Council. I work with Carrick Greengrocers, and I work with Belfast Food Partnership and various other bits and pieces besides. And I want to just say a bit about those three things because I think it's useful. So the Food Ethics Council work and the Food Ethics Council itself is really looking at kind of systemic change, UK-wide food systems. We're mostly working remotely, and our work is about connecting and amplifying and noticing things and being able to link things up. And that's about patterns and challenges and opportunities and making those things visible and making the work that goes into those things visible and the opportunities and challenges visible. And putting ethics and, as I say, decency, what's a really decent decision, at the heart of food systems. The Belfast Food Partnership is, again, systemic intervention, but place-based work in Belfast, and that's about shifting policy and practice by doing things differently, and lots of you will be familiar with Sustainable Food Places movement. And then Carrick Greengrocers is a very little greengrocers in a town outside Belfast called Carrickfergus. And you could describe that as kind of just local work or even hyper-local. But it is also a systemic intervention in the food system. You know, a greengrocers is not just a greengrocers. And we'll talk a bit more about that as well. And I just want to, before I hand over, want to just frame this a little bit. When we're talking about systemic change with the very often used but very important Buckminster Fuller quote, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you must build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So there's something really powerful in that. And I don't think we can all actually just do that. I think we're all working within the existing systems, but we're kind of, you know, doing our best to nudge them out, to move them and shift them. But that's really my dream, is that we make the existing system obsolete. And that's what these guys are trying to do every day. So I'm going to hand over now to Cormac. No, did I?
I don't mind.
No, actually, it's not. See, I wrote it down. Helen.
Me.
I'm going to hand over to Helen to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you so much, Beth. Have we got some Northern Irish folk in the room? I can see a few sort of brilliant.
Got some yos, love it.
Some yos. We've got some yos in there. Sorry, that's particular Northern. Yeah. Do feel free to chip in on the conversation as we go. I'm also really keen, when we were chatting and setting up for this, we were like, coming to Oxford and to this conference, we know that there is so much wisdom in the audience that we'll be talking to, and we feel a wee bit kind of, you know, it would be so wrong of us to sort of sit up here and tell you all about us without trying to get something back from you. So on the post-its there, there's challenges and questions, that things we're wrestling with, which we'll sort of frame as we go through chatting about the sort of challenges we're trying to work on. So what we're really keen to get is just, as we go through, if you have answers to those questions, if you have suggestions for us, if you know projects that we should be looking at, if you have kind of, any kind of useful stuff that you think we can use in our work, please just make a little note of it, and we'll collect those in at the end, and that'll be, you know, we'll be getting so much value out of this opportunity to chat in front of you guys. So, that's what the post-its are for, just... any thoughts that you have as we go through, and we all have questions for you as we go through. So I am Helen Keys. I farm with my husband Charlie's up the back there. We have a farm in County Tyrone. It's would have been a mixed farm traditionally. It went to dairy, then a suckler herd. We now grow flax on the farm, and also vegetables, and it's part of a rotation. So we have various different things that are coming out of the farm. I am also, my sort of day job is working in enterprise and innovation. So I'm going to chat about the enterprise side of farming, really, and the innovation side of farming. So I work as an entrepreneur in residence at Queen's University, and there I do all the stuff around entrepreneurship, all the kind of customer discovery, lean launch approaches, how to be more entrepreneurial. I support students to launch things, start their own businesses and all of that. So it's really interesting for me to look at how that applies in farming and how those areas cross over. So I'm going to chat a bit about that. I am also Vice Chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in Northern Ireland, so I work closely along with Cormac. I'm also working on a project called the GrowIN Innovation Network, which is funded by the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. And that is about trying to help farmers to be more innovative. You know, how can we kind of make the change that we need to make, and how can we just get on and do that, really, and you know, at a farm level, talking to each other about how we can make that kind of change. I also set up a business called Source Grow, which is about helping restaurants to source vegetables more locally. So we'll talk a wee bit about that as well. So as Beth said, many hats. And we tend to do that in Northern Ireland. We all tend to have many hats, and we all tend to, everybody knows everybody. And if you don't know somebody, you'll know somebody who knows that person, pretty much, as we found out at the conference. So just to set the context for you a little bit about farming in Northern Ireland, I grew up on a farm. My dad got into farming, had quite an intensive poultry farm, and so I grew up with it really, and then married a farmer as well. So farming's been in my life and will be always in my life. Farming in Northern Ireland is very, very, very livestock heavy. We are the main crop that we grow is grass, and we're really good at growing grass. We grow an awful lot of grass, and that's our main crop. But very, very low on, I think only maybe 3% of agricultural production is horticulture, really low on vegetables. We're also really rubbish at eating vegetables, it's worth saying. You know the way you're supposed to eat like 11 a day or something like that? We're about 2.5, so really bad at it. So yeah, why would we grow them when we don't eat them, I suppose? But yeah, that's definitely something we need to get better at. So, we have a big challenge around how do we stimulate that horticultural sector? How do we get more people into growing veg? A little bit of cereals. We are seeing a real, there was a bit of a sort of revival in sort of very small market gardens. I think we're seeing a bit more of those popping up now. Often people who aren't from a farming background but really keen to get into growing and so on. So we're seeing a bit of that kind of activity starting. We have that 3% of horticultural production tend to be, that's your kind of field scale veg growers. Few and far between, and if anything, I suspect that might be shrinking a little bit. There's been some really good people who have gone out of it recently. So that's the kind of grass main crop is the kind of situation that farming is in. And I suppose, on our farm, we would have been pretty much dependent on having other jobs and dependent on single farm payment. And I think that is the situation for an awful lot of farmers, that it's really hard to kind of make it profitable. And I suppose coming from my kind of enterprise background, I'm looking at that going, 50 acres of land, how can you not make a living from that? That just is crazy. How can we not make a living from that? So that was kind of, my thinking was, I've got to look and see what type of farming's more profitable. What could we be doing with our farm that's going to be better than, relying on the government for a grant or, having to do other jobs? Can we not get to the point where we can both be full-time at this and working on it and so on? So I spend a bit of time kind of looking around. One of the first things that I sat down, I got an agronomist, a guy called Lindsay, who used to work for AFB, and said, Lindsay, what could we be doing with this? What sort of stuff could we grow on our farm? And he started, sort of hummed and had, we came up with a good list of other things that we could be growing. And Food Foundation had done a really good piece of work around looking at, of all the vegetables and things that we eat in the UK, the top 50 most popular, there's like 35 or something like that we don't grow, that we could. So there's this huge gap between, what we need and what we're not growing. So that, with my business hat on, I'm like, well, that's the opportunity really, isn't it, to kind of try and close that gap. So Lindsay and I sat down and we developed a list of, there's something like 180 different varieties of things that he reckons you could totally grow those in Northern Ireland. Nobody's really doing it. There's a demand for it. And that list, it's online, it's open source, anyone can look at it. You can filter it by, the growing season, filter it by the pH in the soil, filter it by, so that was just a kind of starting point to say, here's a resource for anybody who's thinking about growing anything other than grass. That you can do that in Northern Ireland, you absolutely can. And we've got great examples of market gardeners working on like an acre of land and producing this amazing stuff and making decent money from it. So, the examples are there. The next challenge was really, if you can grow all this stuff, where do you go to sell it and where do you get your market? And that, again, from an enterprise perspective, is the next kind of thing we have to go and look at. I think it's kind of slightly unique in Northern Ireland that for years and years and years, when I was growing up, the only big supermarket that wasn't local was M&S. Would that be right? Yeah. For years and years and years, and it was only really after the Troubles were over that the other big multiples started moving in, and we got our, you know, all the other kind of big chains of supermarkets. And I think that during that, when they came in, I think I heard somebody talking on the radio about this, so I'm sort of stealing this idea. But when they came in, we all went buck mad for those. Like, oh, look what you can get in the big supermarkets. These are fantastic. And we forgot about all the local greengrocers and the local suppliers and all of those things. We just got so obsessed with our brilliant, convenient supermarket shopping, and that's where we went. I feel like we really, over a couple of decades, really lost touch with local produce. We just, you know, we were so sort of loved things coming in from other places that seemed quite exotic to us. So I think that's quite a unique thing, that we have a bit of a disconnect there with our sort of local supply chain. So we have a lot of work to do, I think, to rebuild all of that connection, and that's something we're all, I guess, working on. So one of the projects I worked on, which I mentioned, SourceGrow, which is up on the screen there at the minute, I did that, you know, when you're in the enterprise kind of world, customer discovery is the big thing. You know, you don't do market research anymore. You do customer discovery, which is talking to your customers before you develop your idea, right? So you don't go and sort of pitch your idea to them. You find out what your customer needs first. So I was thinking, could we sell vegetables to chefs? That seems to be a kind of an obvious thing. Lots of chefs want to buy local. So we did a sort of customer discovery exercise. So we got all the chefs in a room. Sorry, it was on Zoom, because it was like literally as the lockdown happened. But it was brilliant because they had time to talk to us, which they didn't usually have. So we had time to, they were really generous. And we got them talking about why they did or didn't buy local produce. And they all said, of course, we would want to buy local produce. Of course, we would love to buy local produce. But it's just really challenging and difficult because I have to go to each individual supplier and have a relationship with each individual person. And then they told us great stories about, they got in a real moaning kind of session. And they had told us great stories about coming in to, you know, having farmers bring produce in through their restaurant in the middle of service with receipts and invoices written on the back of envelopes, and, you know, that kind of, they want to do it, but we need to make it easier for them. So that's what led to SourceGrow. But the big thing that for me came out of that, and the big challenge, and the thing we want your ideas on, was the massive issue around it is logistics and getting the stuff to the right place. And now Northern Ireland, it's quite compact. We live right in the middle. We're in County Tyrone. We're like an hour from everywhere. Or you can get to anywhere within an hour. So you've got a kind of nice, easily manageable kind of territory that you're working with in Northern Ireland. But our big challenge is farmers want to stay on the farm. They don't want to be spending all their time doing deliveries. It makes no sense. And we have vans going up and down the M1 and the M2, our two motorways, round and round Lough Neagh, passing each other, half full, coming back. And, you know, it just makes no sense the way it's working. So I'm chatting to chefs who have, you know, 10 different vans arriving at their door, delivering sort of small amounts of stuff. And it's just not really kind of, it just makes no sense. So that's a massive issue that we need to crack, is that how we move stuff around. So if any of you guys know any good examples of how people have cracked that, I see people nodding. Fantastic. We're going to get help with it.
There's post-its getting filled there.
Excellent, brilliant. That's what one of the big nuts for us to crack. I'll not go on for too much longer. I want to mention though. The GrowIN Innovation Network, it's a group of, it's all farmers who sort of came together, and we want to chat about how we can kind of create the conditions where innovation can kind of happen on farms. I don't know if this is a Northern Ireland thing or not. You can let us know whether you think it is, but we're quite risk averse. Yeah, we're quite risk averse, not just in farming, but also in, you know, I think our government's quite risk averse. Yeah, okay. So it's that kind of, how can we create the conditions where people think it's okay to try stuff out, where it's okay to fail at something, it's okay to take a risk, it's okay to, have a go at something and maybe it not pan out. We have this, a sort of thing where there's almost a sense of kind of, if somebody tries something different, everybody's kind of watching and going, what's that boy at? What are they doing? So, with the GrowIN Innovation Network, that's what we wanted to do, was create the conditions where innovation can happen. And that's, getting farmers together on farms, it's, talking to each other, chatting about challenges, but also creating this sort of situation where we can just try stuff out. So with the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission are really good. They kind of let us have a go at stuff. So we set up, one of the things we thought we'd do is, instead of just training people or let's just try and start something. Mm-hmm. So we got people together who were interested in growing veg. Just got them all together in a room. We brought buns and tea and coffee, and we just that's pretty much all we did to start with, was just bring the people together and let the conversations happen. And out of that, we identified, well, first of all, everybody wanted to open a farm shop. Everybody was going, right, we're all going to open a farm shop. And we're sort of looking at that going, is that, everybody's going to open a farm shop, up their lanes and in these kind of wee hidden places. And we worked out between us that maybe wasn't the best strategy. So we, instead, there's one existing farm shop that's already there. We found that there were 5 or 6 other growers who all wanted to grow stuff. So they all got together and said, well, how about if we kind of coordinate? So I'll grow this and you grow that and somebody else will grow that. And we all come together on a Friday morning. We bring all our produce to the farm shop. We work with Ubi. Don't know if any of you come across Ubi. Ubi, out of our own backyard, are over at, they have a stand over in the town hall. So do go and see them. Ubi is dead simple platform to allow people to order up veg boxes. So we use Ubi. People order the boxes. We come together on a Friday, put all our stuff in the boxes, take it back out to the farms, and the customers come and collect it from the farms. Really kind of just dead simple. But we have this kind of, it was one of the farmers came up with this, where everybody who puts stuff in the box just gets paid a flat rate, $1.65 per portion. And then we sell it for a little bit more than that. And it's just kind of, it makes it all really fair. Everybody's happy that they're getting well paid for their produce. The customers are happy because they're getting good value produce. There's a little bit left over for the veg collective to pay for a bit of marketing and stuff. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be a more simple business model, really, but it seems to work, and the growers seem to be happy with it. So with that, we were just kind of following that lean launch approach of how could we get something up and running really quickly, really simply, powered by tray bakes. And I think I'm interested to hear again if you've other examples of stuff that you can get up and running, really simple, really quick, easy ways to help farmers get stuff to market, to help farmers make some money, or to help farmers diversify into those kind of other crops and so on. I've more to chat about, but I sort of feel like I've been going on a long time. Will I hand over to Cormac and we can come back to some of the other stuff?
Yeah,
right.
Lovely.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the simplicity of that collaboration you're talking about is really good to hear about, because I always laugh at, you think of, it's very easy to get excited about big ideas and then go to C before you went past A and B. And I always go back to being a teenager and people starting bands and then falling out over what the band name is before they've played music together, And it's there's a lot to be said for that lean launch, as you're saying there. So I'm Cormac Dolan. I'm the Northern Ireland manager for the Nature Friendly Farming Network. So I work closely with both Beth and Helen here. And again, a few different situations. I also sit on Belfast Sustainable Food Partnership with Beth, which is a great organisation bringing lots of different fields. And it's one of those things that you see, you're sort of thinking, oh, we need to get this person here and this person here. And it's very easy to say that, and it never actually happens. But that's one organisation that you actually are getting all these different landowners, like the Education Authority and Housing Executive and all these people, and getting them with community farmers as well, and trying to bring that and get through the red tape and actually get a bit of momentum going there. So it's great to be part of that. I sit on Northern Ireland Environment Link as well, so trying to work with policymakers to influence agri-environment schemes going forward, because we're probably safe to say we're a bit behind everybody on that, but we're still pushing for something ambitious, hopefully by next year, to come out. But again, that takes a lot of collaboration, and by sitting on the environment link, it means we can team up with NGOs and really have a stronger voice when we're trying to tackle bigger, larger forces that are maybe trying to stop change, maybe trying to weigh in a bit stronger. So there's a lot of value in collaboration when it comes to that too. I guess a wee bit about myself is I came from a rural background, really into nature, and grew up doing a bit of farming as well myself. And so going to the NFFN really seemed like a natural sort of progression for me. Wanting to do a bit of farming myself in time as well. It's just probably everybody here is trying to get a bit of land, but I couldn't have predicted the level of inspiration that was going to come with that job when I got it, and meeting people like Beth and Helen here, and meeting all these different people of the different rooms we're talking about, where you're going into a meeting and it's got a different name than the last one, but you're seeing the same friendly faces and the same energy and the same want for change that's present there. And it's just exactly what you need when you're like worn down from reading too much bad news and hearing about how things can't change, and hearing the negative story of farming and the lack of profitability in farming. My role is constantly telling the positive stories, and there are plenty of them, and we just need to keep telling them. So yeah, that's an excellent part of that. And yeah, what Helen's talking about there, of that I think what we're all coming to is scaling outwardly and not upwardly. You've got those growers coming together, not trying to become one big super farm shop that's trying to hog all the market to themselves. They're realizing that actually we can get more enjoyment out of collaboration again here, and actually it can work favourably for everybody. So yeah, definitely all ears in terms of supply chain tactics of how to get that on a bigger scale that still keeps the grassroots aspect of it for people, ideally. And I think there's something that is beyond money making. We were talking about this yesterday, Helen, in that aspect of by building community and by people connecting with each other again through these things and through these positive movements, you're creating a new culture of hope, and the inspiration that comes with it is really real. And I see that all the time with the Nature Friendly Farming Network, seeing farmers who've dipped their toes in a bit of change in their farm, and then they start to see the momentum that it brings, and they start to actually love their job again. And the time and time again I'm hearing that story of they wanted out, they were nearly leaving, and then now they're completely passionate about it again. So there's a lot of things you can't put on a spreadsheet, I guess, that are involved, that come out of these projects and this type of work. But so my theme is land, yeah. So I'll get into that. The communities and these farmers that we're talking about, or any sort of change, people need access to a space, and if it's for farming and production, they need access to land. And like I'm saying there, that's not always that easy, unless you're lucky enough to have some in the family or something. But there is, I guess, a real risk aversion with that, like Helen was saying, in Northern Ireland, and a real clinging on to controlling your own piece of land and not wanting someone else to tell you how to manage it. But I think there's worth looking into a bit of context for that. You don't have to go back too far in the history of that land ownership, that it would have been huge landowners owning that land, choosing rent prices themselves as and when they wish to up the prices. Huge families living on that land and trying to live off it. And there was a lot of push for land reform in the early 1800s, but it probably took an avoidable mass starvation of about 1 million people to actually get any political momentum by the time it actually did come to land reform. So 1870, you had the Land Reform Act. If farmers and families then being able to work with the government to pay off their landlords and eventually get the farm put into their own name. But that could be 2 generations. So say if they did start doing that later, 1870 is the act, so it could be later than that. So you could be talking 1910, 1920 by the time somebody's paid this farm off and it's in their land. You start thinking about that and what that carries into people. And, if that was your grandparents, then you might be quite precious about what's happening with your land and what somebody's going to tell you how to manage it, and, telling you that they know better about how to manage it. I can totally understand that aspect. And also in terms of letting people onto your land to work on it, there's also a pressure there of how does that mean? How are you going to keep autonomy? How are you going to know that that's still your farm that you're family have worked so hard to get. So I think there's importance in that context of that, but that's sort of showing about where we're coming from to show where we are, but that explains a bit, I guess, where we are now when it comes to that risk aversion and a real protectiveness of any land that is owned by people. But it's not always the case, and actually in my spare time, me and my family, my partner and my wee toddler, we go down to a market garden, one like Helen was talking about there, on less than an acre, on a farm that itself was actually worked. Barry, who works there, he can go back and look at the books and see that his great-granda was part of that deal from the Land Reform Act. They worked over 2 generations to get that land back, and he is aiming towards putting the farm into a community-owned farm going into the future and wanting people to buy shares into it. So there is examples of people that are really going full opposite direction with that, and in terms of inviting the community back onto the land. And we go down there and volunteer. We're building a group of, there's about 5 regular volunteers there, and they're really building a good community there. And again, all the positive things that are coming with that are just fantastic. We're also bringing veg boxes that are subsidised into low socio-economic background areas nearby, so there's people getting access to good food, hopefully eating more vegetables, like Helen's saying is needed in Northern Ireland. Yep. So that there's again all sorts of extra positives that are coming with that, and certainly my daughter loves it. She calls the polytunnel the nummy house, and demands to be taken there. I'm still trying to let her accept that there's no tomatoes in it at the minute, but she wants nummy house every time you're down there. So. Yeah, that's when you see that, like, it just fills your heart, with hope, like, when you see that going forward. So yeah, Barry is he's. I want to give him a good shout here when I'm talking about. He's with the Land Workers Alliance, and he just couldn't make it to this panel. He probably would have been on here with us if he could have made it here. So want to give Barry Ferguson a good shout in the work that he's doing there and forming that CSA and bringing the opportunity for people like me to be involved and all the local people to get that fresh vegetables. And that's exactly the sort of thing we need to see scale outwardly in Northern Ireland. So I'm keen to hear if anybody's involved in CSAs or anything like that, how that can be done. One of my ambitions in my role as Northern Ireland manager is that I've got a lot of connection with larger farmers, and I'm also connected with these people who are wanting to enter farming. And I think it's actually more common than you would think that there's people wanting to have a bit of crossover there, but there's just a bit of caution, I suppose, because you don't know, people aren't going to start just letting, the hippie commune come to their farm, I guess, if it's a word. Maybe some people would see it. What was James Rebanks saying earlier? Cranks. He was talking about cranks at the plenary, and how do you? He's now won over. He's friends with said cranks, How do you bring these people together? And I would love in my role to be able to do that work as a connector between people who want that new youthful energy on their land with new ideas and bring in revitalising farming systems to land that's maybe not making money and hasn't been for a while. And we can bring those people together. So just telling that positive story, again, is a big part of what I'm trying to do. So yeah, that's, guess, my question that I was going to ask outwardly is, how do you sell that to someone? How do you allow... one thing I didn't mention was that actually land rental in Northern Ireland is usually done on what's called a con-acre agreement here, and that's usually technically on paper less than 12 months. Sometimes it's a history of crop growing, really. It's comes from renting out a field to grow spuds or turnips or something in, and you get it for the growing season, and then you're leaving it to the owner for a couple of months as well. And then often that's done in a rollover system, and it doesn't actually change, and it works quite well for 20 years for both parties, and they're quite happy. But in terms of security, in terms of regenerative planning, it doesn't really give much opportunity going forward. So how do you encourage people to be interested in 5-10 year rental plans? How do you make the landowner feel that that's safe for them, and how do you let more security come to the people wanting to enter farming that way too? So that's something I'm all ears for as well. And we've got an absolute array of experience in here, I'm sure. So as Helen and Beth have said, I'm keen to hear from you guys too. I think that's all from me for now.
Lovely, thanks. So my area is community. So those kind of 3 pillars of land, enterprise and community, and the way they come together and intersect, I think there's really interesting interesting stuff happening in Northern Ireland. So you'll see there's a purple bag there that says I'm a co-owner of Carrick Greengrocers. That's mine. So Carrick Greengrocers that I mentioned is a community-owned cooperative greengrocer in Carrickfergus, which is about 8 or 9 miles outside Belfast city centre. If you don't know me or anybody else from Carrick Greengrocers, I would hazard a guess that if you've ever heard of Carrick, it'll be to do with paramilitarism, it'll be to do with loyalist violence. People, whenever I started working with Carrick Greengrocers, and I would tell people not from Carrick that I was working in Carrick, they would go, literally, it's like quite shocking. And I suppose, if I'm very honest, like possibly 5 or 6 years ago, I might have done something similar myself. Maybe not that quite a visceral reaction, but certainly would have had an idea about Carrick that didn't have anything really very positive in it. And then about 3.5 years ago, maybe, I was invited by a friend, Lee, who lives in Carrick, has lived in Carrick all her life, who was just starting to explore the potential for a community, well, not even a community greengrocer, but just something that connected people with good fresh food, and whether that might be a pop-up or it might be, didn't know what it would be, and it turned into Carrick Greengrocers. And that journey has been one of the most kind of profound, joyful, difficult journeys of my life. I described it a few weeks ago as like a complete joy and a slog, and it is. It's both those things. You know, who knew that running a greengrocer's was hard? Well, everybody, because not very many people do it. So that kind of collection of people was 9 of us, 8 of them from in and around Carrick. I'm from East Belfast. I've got no history with farming or growing apart from tomatoes on my windowsill, which is like magic, like actual literal magic that you can grow a tomato on your windowsill. Nummy. But 8 other people from Carrick, all different sorts of people, different sorts of expertise, different, I guess, different classes, different political backgrounds in a Northern Ireland context. But all either deeply invested in Carrick and wanting it to thrive, or in the power of good fresh veg, and that people have a right to it. And I talk a lot in all parts of my work about like good veg is a human right. The right to food is absolutely critical in all of this work. So we had, I guess, about a year of meeting every 3 weeks, and that was really all anybody signed up to, was just to come together and meet for a few hours every 3 weeks and talk about, well, like what do you think? What would you want? What can you bring? Who do you know? And just kind of starting to, I can look back on it now and see that we were mapping our expertise and mapping who knew what and mapping lots of things, but it just felt like tea and buns, and just kind of knocking about an idea. Supported, as I mentioned earlier, by Tiziana O'Hara from Cooperative Alternatives. And so both the importance of having a place to meet, and Cormac talked about land, but actually lots of these things fall down because you don't have a regular place to meet. So Positive Carrickfergus, the charity that Lee runs, let us have their space. That's great. That meant that there was always a place we could go. We weren't having to think about, could we have it at somebody's house? Could we go to a cafe? Was Cafe Hope? All that. And Tiziana kind of very slowly, carefully coached and mentored us through this first year, where we all tried to come to like kind of shared values for this place, which in one way sounds very simple, but it's actually incredibly difficult because everybody's got slightly different values or different ideas about what this greengrocer should be. And so kind of a few months in, we started to talk about like what the, I was going to say what the vibe is. What the vibe is of the greengrocers, I don't think we talked about it like that, but in my head that's what it was. What's the vibe? And somebody said, do you know, like a real traditional place. And a couple of us of the 9 kind of went, don't like it. But then you have to, and actually, so for those of you who are Northern Irish, you'll know that traditional is a kind of weighty term in terms of the way things are traditionally done by one community. It's a word that carries a lot of weight, right, to some people. So we're like, and then somebody says, "Oh, like, what happened there with you?" And I was like, "I don't like traditional." And they went, "Oh, right, okay." No, so, I suppose I mean like kind of old. Like, you know, like older values, old-fashioned, like, don't like that either. You know, and that's the point at which some of those things can start to break down, because somebody can get their back up, or I could have been a bit grumpy about it or whatever. But Tiziana's there going, okay, tell me what you're feeling, tell me what you mean by that. And so you can really kind of dig in, and you realise actually that there's no bad intentions. Nobody's being a dick. We're just, we were all coming from different places. And then you get to, somebody says, I mean like the sort of place I would have went like with my granny. You go, okay, we can build from that, because I went to Greengrocers with my granny. I wouldn't call it traditional, I wouldn't call it old-fashioned, but I remember going to Greengrocers with my granny. Right, we can build from that. But still at this point, there's spaces for people. You're not going from 1 to 100. And a couple of people of those 9 did want to go from 1 to 100. We're saying, right, there's a shop on the high street there. Let's do it as a pop-up. Let's get open in 2 months. And Tiziana's saying, no, slow. Because to build it strong and to build these relationships strong, you go slow. And so then, you know, then we started kind of having some conversations with other people in the community, which we were all doing anyway. It wasn't like, we did have some focus groups, but I really don't like talking about focus groups because they're so, they're kind of not false, but like they're not it. You know, the things that actually are the most valuable are when you're sitting with somebody and you're saying, oh, I'm going to meet tonight and I'm blah, blah, blah. And they go, oh, right. You know, that's the talking to your community bit, rather than a kind of artificial getting people together. So we did both. And that's the point at which you start having conversations about like, or, you know, so we want to talk about seasonality. We want to talk about that sort of stuff. And people say, oh, well, are you only going to sell seasonal stuff? Are you going to sell stuff that you can't grow in Northern Ireland? And we did have one meeting where we talked about, would we not sell bananas and oranges and lemons, and we would only sell stuff you could grow in Northern Ireland. We did only have one meeting talking about that, because so we did not go down that road. That would have been very brave. But it's really important to say, like, none of us was a greengrocer. But we had a couple of people who were growing in their gardens. We had a couple of people who had retail experience. We had somebody who worked in kind of finance at the Education Authority. It's kind of an acknowledgement and a recognition that we've all got lots of different skills, and something about giving each of us an opportunity to bring those different skills to grow something that none of us really expected we'd ever be involved in. And like, if you'd have told me 4 years ago I would be co-running a Greengrocers, I would have laughed in your face. I really would have been like, yeah, a good one. But here we are. I'm rambling. I could talk about Greengrocers all day. I won't. But through a process of then, we started to think about writing a business plan. We started to think about governance. We started to think about how we're going to raise the startup capital. And we opted for a community share offer. And that's really, then you start kind of really thinking about the place where you are. And a lot of community share offers, you might know, a community share offer is a way that people in a community or in a place can buy shares. It's not like a traditional share. It's not like an investment share. It's like a kind of co-ownership share, and you're both a member and an owner of the business. And a lot of community share offers will set their minimum price at like £200, because it's quite a thing logistically to manage a community share offer. So kind of, if you set it at £200, the kind of hope is, I don't know, you'll kind of get whatever, lots and lots of multiples of £200. But we knew in Carrick, which has suffered greatly through kind of closure of factories in the 80s and various, I won't go down the route of talking about capitalism, but suffered greatly. the £200 would be an enormous barrier. So we set our minimum share buy-in at £25. And most of the money we raised came from 25 people spending £25. Some 50, like then lots of £50, lots of £100, a few £250, a few £500, to £1,000. And over a course of 6 or 7 weeks, we raised £34,000. Unbelievable, unbelievable. And as the person who administered that share offer and sat with, an email inbox here and a spreadsheet here, recording all the things, it was one of the most joyous experiences that people really believed in us. And that's because we'd had those conversations. We were talking about it. We'd met people eye to eye. We'd done town hall events and library events and lots and lots of just kind of people chatting to their families and their friends. So people had a real connection with us, which was really kind of, I was going to say organic, and really natural, because 8 of those people lived in Carrick, and they were known and they were trusted. And even if people didn't know them directly, they understood that kind of they'd seen them on the high street or whatever. So raised that money, opened the shop. That was a hilarious 4 weeks of like kind of getting money, literally money in the bank, and then going, I've actually got to do it now. I've actually got to open a Greengrocers. And you're still kind of thinking, well, like, people will come because they were a bit interested or they invested. And we took like £10,000 in our first week. And we'd forecasted like, I don't know, about 1,000 or something, maybe less. But people really were so interested and excited, and they couldn't believe it was happening in Carrick. That's the thing. Yeah. Because nothing good ever happens here. And it's like, well, no, but it does. So that's the thing about things like this that's why I said a greengrocer is not just a greengrocers. It is a greengrocers. It's a place people can go and buy good local veg. But it's also telling a story of like you deserve nice things. We all deserve nice things. You deserve it. And every place is like that. Even places where people go, oh, God, it's crap there. Why would you want to go there? Because it's a place like anywhere else, and people live there, and they deserve good veg. It's a human right. That's the joy part. The slog part, and it is sloggy running a greengrocers. But that's the power in that kind of the community of us as a board of directors and the broader community. And we've got lots of people who are members are also volunteers. Lots of people who aren't members kind of obviously shop with us and volunteer as well. You're finding these different ways to connect what you're doing with the things that people want and people are really kind of crying out for. And it is about community, but ultimately it's about connection. So it's about connection with each other, but it's also about connection with the land and connection with our food. So connection is one of those key words. And people are excited when they come into the greengrocers. People are like, they look around, it's like, it's because they haven't had one in Carrick for 20 years. And we're excited. Most of my work is by a computer in my living room. And that's lovely, and I'm very privileged to be able to do it. But like one day a fortnight, I work on a till, and people come in and I chat to them, and they sometimes, Cormac was saying earlier about Jerusalem artichokes, and we had one, and then somebody's like, what is this? And I was like, I don't know. But we'll Google it. She said, what would you do with it? I was like, let's Google it together. So there's not it's not like, it's just very much not we as a board of directors are doing this wonderful thing for you. This is an amazing thing, and it's a greengrocers, it's a connection place, it's a place where you can come buy great food, but we're all in it together. That's the magic of it. So the kind of big challenge then is and like we talked, both Cormac and Helen, we don't want to, I'm not interested in opening another community business. I'm co-running a greengrocers. I'm quite happy with that. So it's not about scale. It's not about there being 10 other greengrocers in 10 other towns, and we as a board of whatever are going to be doing them. It's about replication. It's about us being really visible, and telling the story of what we've done, how great it was, how joyful it was, how hard it was, the truth of it, but also with the absolute core belief of you can do this too, because we weren't greengrocers. So it's about that kind of the belief that change is possible, and how do we, through talking about what we've done and writing about it and sharing photographs of it, that helps people to get actually we don't need to wait for somebody to come and do this. And it might not be a greengrocer's, it might be a butcher, it might be a dairy, it might be a community garden, it might be a market, market garden, it can be whatever it is. But it is possible for things to change, and you don't need to wait for someone to come and change it for you. So I suppose that's my big kind of message around, is always about kind of possibility, and what can we do to kind of foster a belief that change is possible. So I guess that's my kind of question to you, if there's kind of things and those kind of little things, or examples, or challenges you've got for us, stick that on a post-it. Yeah, please.
Can I just add, it is more than a greengrocer's from a farmer's point of view as well, and from the grower's point of view. The opportunity of a route to market like that is absolutely brilliant for us. And you do take a lot of local produce, and there are growers. Certainly, you were taking stuff from Source Grow, and then I know local growers. There was one of them speaking on an event we were at, who was saying, "I can sell everything that I grow within 8 miles." I think that's incredible. Between a few farmers markets and what you guys can take, even though there's a Tesco's and a Sainsbury's and a couple of Asda's and all these other places within that 8 mile radius, he can sell everything that he grows, and there's room for loads more, So that kind of evidence that you're providing now of, yes, there is a market, yes, there is a demand, that's really powerful. I think that's what will help to replicate it.
Thank you. That's a good reminder, because when you said earlier about kind of vans coming up to restaurants and deliveries being made during service, I kind of smiled, because that's something that we love in the greengrocers. Whenever people make deliveries when we're open, and Helen, whenever we just opened, Helen was bringing stuff in from Source Grow to us as well. And now Chris Dobbs, who Helen was just talking about there, who grows to organic principles on 1/4 of an acre. He literally lifts stuff out of the soil 5 miles up the road and brings it to us within a couple of hours. And so there's all sorts of stuff there about nutrition and freshness and value, but there's also the sight of a farmer walking up the street carrying a big thing, and people see him coming past with all these gorgeous looking carrots, and they're interested, and they see him come in, and sometimes he brings his wee daughter. So there's this immediate, we don't have to have a meet the farmer event, although they're great. It's just this immediate connection that we have with people who are growing, and people can see it and see him and meet him, and they're interested, and they want to know where up the road. Really, I didn't know there was anybody growing up there, and blah blah blah. And also then from that, when we opened, a couple of weeks after we opened, would somebody come in and said they were growing tomatoes, would be interested. Are we ever? Take their hand off. And they said, but also we've grapes. Excuse me. Grapes, and they were growing grapes in a polytunnel just as a kind of out of interest, just to see if they could. And then actually they were great. So that first summer and a bit last summer, we had grapes, and then and a really important thing for us is that we've got labels on everything, very clear if it's grown locally, if it's grown in Carrick, if it's grown in Northern Ireland, if it's grown in France. So we do have stuff that's not from Northern Ireland, because it comes from a wholesaler, but we're really open about that, so we can have conversations about why that is. And we said, on the wee grapes grown in Carrick, and people are like, oh yeah.
What?
No, we did. They were.
Some wine going next.
Yeah. Microbrewery. Somebody's extremely excited about starting a microbrewery. but I suppose it's just that that route to market thing is really important. And I'll just have a wee gentle, humble brag, not even humble brag, just a brag. The Northern Ireland Food Strategy Framework was launched in November by a DERA minister, which is our version of DEFRA. And they asked us if they could launch it from the greengrocers, which was huge for us, huge recognition. But it also means that work we're doing, talking about possibility and change is possible and belief and blah, 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 is getting out there. We are existing in people's heads, which is fantastic. So whenever that kind of, I guess, validation of what we're doing, you don't only want validation from DERA. Validation from the community is far more important. But those little pockets of kind of attention are really good as well to that kind of possibility agenda of like some people saying that and going, oh, well, they look like us. Who can we talk to? You can talk to me. Yeah.
Shall we open the conversation up a little bit?
Let's do that.
Did you see the 5-minute signal that we got there?
Okay.
All right, sorry.
Maybe 3. Yeah, I didn't know if you guys had seen it.
Nothing coming in online yet.
Okay.
Okay.
But I imagine they'll start. But
Yeah.
we've got somebody who
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got more just for.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. My interest is in supply chains and systems change. So on one end is the food. And my diet a lot has changed. It's vegan anyway, but I started stripping out a lot of the grains and having a lot more high protein, like chickpeas and stuff. And in terms of protein foods, I know that Ireland is very famous for growing the hemp, the flax, and also the seaweed as well, which a lot of people don't know. People are chasing protein powders and everything outside of Europe, but I guess it's just got to come to market from the Irish and actually say we've got these 3 unique omega-filled proteins, but how much are we actually translating that to the mainland of the UK and the British Isles? That's one question. Second question, you were, guy in the end, you were talking about, I think you're probably referring to the sovereignty of the land in Ireland. We have a similar issue in the global south. Africa, India, South America. But what I do find concerning and connected to that is that, in the West, people are saying, okay, we worried about tomatoes going this way or transporting from one side of London to the other. I'm seeing another angle, which is people are worried about the distance of the vegetables they're travelling. But then we're putting those vegetables or those fruits or anything you want to transport into an EV car where the zinc and the copper is coming from 3,000 miles away. And it's destroying someone else's farmland in Africa or India. And it's the same thing in Ireland. You've got wind turbines just laid to waste for 10, 15 years across farms. And I'm like thinking, farmer must be really wanting to use that land for something else. But he didn't write it into the contract. End of life, who's going to pick up this 100-ton wind turbine? My question is, this green transition, where a lot of people are saying there's a lot of greenwashing, the greenwashing is in the green solutions themselves. And how much are people prepared to give up in not just Ireland, but the whole of the Western world, and actually saying, we want our local vegetables and fruits, but we also want electrification. But if you want the electrification, give up your land, give up your soil. Watch it get mined like what's happening in Africa and India. So my question is, do people understand, while chasing these idealistic goals, do people understand the impact of the unintended consequences of going green? And how to get that green product, it's all the way in Africa, when actually we should be working on solutions like industrial hemp for a house that doesn't require all these silly inputs. You've got so much indigenous knowledge and history across the whole of the British Isles, yet we're chasing something all the way over there. We've got most of the stuff in the British Isles, in Ireland, with their rich history. But are we actually just chasing these green ideological goals on one side, which have got huge impacts, while actually saying, well, isn't there a better way to just design this house or design this car which doesn't require these inputs. And if we go down this path of green, I'm reading in the stats, 30 to 40% of cars bought in Carrick is EVs. The more it goes up, the more land has to be desecrated. That's a fact, right? And people want to call it green. How much are people prepared to give up and say, I don't know if we want these EV cars. I don't know if we want these wind turbines because am I going to have to see it dumped on my friend's farm? Are people prepared to go there?
Okay.
And actually, on my plate, I want some seaweed, I want some hemp, I want some flax, but it shouldn't have to come from China or India. It should come from the Irish. But how do we actually address those things? Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I start on
Please.
Sorry. I'm not sure I can answer all of your question, and certainly we need to think about end of life and all of those. That's really important for us to consider all of those things. I can talk about flax, though. We grow flax on our farm, and we've started doing that over the last 6 or 7 years. So the potential to develop those kind of crops, flax and hemp and those kind of fibre crops, I think is a real opportunity. And obviously Ireland was like one of the best places in the world in terms of growing flax and hemp, and it was one of our big crops, so we know we can do it. We were really, really good at it. So I think certainly that's something that we can bring back. It's certainly knowledge that we can share. It's certainly something that could be developed right across the UK and so on. So I think you're right. The opportunity in terms of increasing those kind of crops is huge, and it's certainly something we're looking into. I think the main thing around that, and sorry I'm going off topic from your question, but the key thing is how we rebuild those kind of industries in a way that actually is workable and sustainable, and it doesn't sort of go back to those industries at a time when we had flax growing in Ireland. It was actually really quite polluting. The conditions in the mills were really bad. People were treated really badly. So there's a lot of bad stuff about those industries. So as we rebuild those, we need to think about that and think about rebuilding them in a way that's much more fair, that is non-polluting, and that's totally possible. We just need to change the model to something that's more localised, and I think there's possibilities around that. So I can talk about flax. I'm not so sure I know so much about batteries, though.
Well, I would come into that. I'm no battery expert either, but I think it comes to the way that things are measured and understanding of the whole picture when it comes to environmentalism. Like you're saying there, it's all well and good not having the combustion engine there, but if your battery's coming from somewhere and it's causing a lot of destruction, then that needs to be measured into the entirety of that calculation. More local to home, one thing that we would, as the NFFN, are trying to really campaign for is how that's done through carbon auditing on farms. There's a big push for carbon auditing on farms going forward. There's a lot of trying to measure that, but one example would be you might have a housed dairy farm, and because they have a very close-knit farming system that is producing high amounts of milk, that might be seen to be more efficient than an extensive grazed, low-input dairy farm. Likewise, beef production in an intensive system, again, in these carbon audits, is being recognised on paper to produce less carbon per kilo of meat, for example. That when you compare that to actually what the ecological effects of having extensive grazing in certain habitats and how that's essential to maintain certain ecosystems, it can't be used in the same sort of calculation. So yeah, like you're trying to use one tool to measure something and it's just completely inappropriate. Like I think, as you're mentioning there, with some of the problems that you're seeing in terms of the hemp and flax, yeah, it was a perfect question for Helen. The hemp needs to, in general, we need to just have more mixed farming, more crops being grown, and more rotation. As Helen was saying, there's a real focus on just growing grass in Northern Ireland, so we'd like to see more of that come back. But again, needs to be done in a way that the market share is fair and it's looking after people in a sustainable way and not just going back to the way it was. I'm not familiar with anybody growing much hemp at the minute. I know
There are.
there would have been huge, as you say, like the biggest rope building industry was in Belfast about 100 years ago, like, so it's not long ago. So to see more of that come back would be brilliant. I know that there is some research happening. AFBI, the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, which is the research section of DAERA in Northern Ireland, they are doing research into proteins, into plant proteins, happening, I think, in partnership with the University of Ulster. Lisa Black is the researcher in charge of that. So there is things happening in terms of protein, plant protein production in Northern Ireland. So I don't know all the details of that, but there's more of that, and it is happening.
And then, yeah, I mean, totally. Like, I kind of hear your question about what are people prepared to give up. I think there's just something about kind of being free or being kind of comfortable in having those conversations and not just kind of barreling down one road or another and actually saying, yeah, actually this stuff is there are things to be balanced, and that's kind of, I suppose, in our work in the Food Ethics Council, that's a lot about what we do. It's like kind of what are we giving up here, or what are we losing by going down this road, and then trying to find that kind of balance between people, planet, animals, and that kind of the whole planet, not just the bits of the planet that we're sitting on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's industry, it's like, you know, then we obviously need to turn an eye to industry as well, because obviously industry, especially when we're talking about batteries, you know, industry, they have a vested interest in not having the public largely aware of where the consequences of their green batteries are coming from, because a lot of people don't know when we're talking about things like this.
Yeah.
So when we're focusing on the consumer, then in situations like this, the pressure needs to be on industry. You know, because we are all caught in this web of capitalism, right? This is the core problem that we all have, and acknowledging that we are all caught in that web, and what we're trying to do is make little snips as best we can against this monster.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think in terms of things like that, there is a question for industry that the pressure should be kept on them.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, when I see a house which is normally concrete, or sometimes I've seen a hemp house, and they've got a solar panel on top, I was like, for God's sake, okay, so you've got a hemp house, it's nice, you've got the solar panel on top. The solar panel has just completely destroyed your positive impact from growing the hemp. The same with the concrete. My whole thing for the last 10 years is, the more we add external products onto the house, the more we have to think about Africa and India and China. No one's actually internalising and actually saying, why are we still using concrete when 100 years ago, everyone from the Russians to the British and the Irish were using hemp in their houses? And you didn't have all these externalities to worry about. What I'm heading towards is the more that material is grown and extracted or farmed in Ireland, the more of that money stays in Ireland. Whereas the other path is actually anything from 3,000 miles away. So I'm saying this is a way to actually localise the money, localise your, how do you say, your pot of gold, as you say in Ireland, and actually say,
I love it.
This pot of gold come from Ireland, not from somewhere else.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, that's for planners and policymakers, I guess, too, in terms of...
it's also about making the supply of the material available, which is what we're working
at the
to
scale
do,
that would be needed.
100%, totally agree.
But it'd be great to see it.
Any other
We've got
questions?
one coming in.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Great.
Yes, so Emma asks, why do you think Carrick Greengrocers has worked so well in Carrick Fergus? How can this work in other parts of Northern Ireland?
Good question.
So I think it comes from, I think, the deep love and respect with which we built it, and kind of recognition, not of we're some people and we want to open a greengrocers, where will we do it? Let's do it in Carrick. It started from people in Carrick kind of saying in different forums and in different places and in conversations, it's really crap we don't have greengrocers. Deacon's closed 15 or 20 years ago. We've got Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer, Marksies as we call it, Lidl, Asda and Tesco's ringing around the town centre. I want to be able to go and buy 2 potatoes and a carrot and a parsnip and whatever. People actually expressing this, and somebody paid attention. My friend Lee and others who she worked with in Positive Carrickfergus, somebody noticed that kind of those asks, that desire. But it's also about, I would say again, a greengrocer's not just a greengrocer. It's about kind of the need for or the response to the decline of the high street, which is happening in towns all over Northern Ireland, all over the UK, and kind of again somebody noticing that. Capitalism is failing, town centres are dying. We do need these small local independent shops, but actually it's really difficult to run those and run those at a profit as a single trader or a sole trader. But the community business model or cooperative model kind of to that risk conversation, like it not neutralises the risk, but it shares the risk, and it makes the risk much smaller. You've got this kind of investment from lots of people who are investing just what they can afford, just a very little bit in some cases, that helps them to feel part of it and helps the business to come to fruition. But we don't have to make a big profit to keep going. We have to make enough money to pay our staff a real living wage. That's number one for me. To pay our suppliers fairly and on time, every time. That's 1.5. That's very important, and to be able to pay your rent and your bills and stuff like this. So that kind of the cooperative model is the thing. And everywhere, every other town in Northern Ireland, I don't know that there's too many towns in Northern Ireland where the high street is really booming, So for me, it's that kind of really noticing and paying attention what's happening in your place, and then looking to kind of find others who not you want to do stuff to them, but how do you do stuff with them? Thanks.
Thank you for sharing those stories. It's brilliant. I've got two quick questions. The first is you mentioned the Northern Ireland Food Strategy Framework, which came out kind of late last year. Yeah. Just wondered how hopeful you are that what positive impact that might have. And again, with sort of England and Westminster kind of hats on, obviously there's new food strategy for England and being talked about again. So yeah, first question is what about the food strategy framework for Northern Ireland? Will that make a difference? And the second thing is, for those of us across the water over here, what can we do to make sure that Northern Ireland is not ignored and neglected in lots of important discussions around food, or even not taking it a step further beyond, not just not being ignored, but how can we make sure that actively participating and embrace some of the brilliant stuff that you're already doing?
Lovely.
That's for you. Okay.
Well, Dan, I know you do it very well already. So I work with Dan, and Dan has to listen to me every day going, well, what about Northern Ireland? Whenever we're on calls with other people. Dan's a great champion of Northern Ireland. But I think we've all kind of gently danced around this. There's something I think that's really important. I think there is probably a bit of an absence in education around Northern Ireland for people across the water over here. It's not the kind of the role of England and Great Britain in Ireland and Northern Ireland's history is really complicated. And we're a bit, in many ways, a bit spiky about it. So I'm kind of often saying to people like don't ignore us, but don't be coming over here thinking you can tell us what to do. And that's pretty. That's a tricky road for people to walk. But I think the thing is just be interested in Northern Ireland. If you don't know anything about Northern Ireland and the history, just you need to try. So I think that's kind of one thing. and kind of don't forget about us. If you're organising programmes and you're looking for partners or people to talk to, yes, it's a bit more complicated to get to Northern Ireland, but be in touch with people, even if it's just if it's too hard to kind of set up a reciprocal programme. But like, have a conversation, have a chat, have kind of try and
Come and visit.
Come and visit. It's good crack.
Visit. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Do you want to say something about the food strategy framework?
Yeah, I'm happy to if you want to jump in after, Helen. Yeah. I think the food strategy is brilliant to see, and I would like to say, there is a lot of positivity coming, especially from the new DAERA minister. Well, I say new, came in last year, very supportive of the type of change that we're talking about and what the NFFN and other organisations are wanting to see. Like the minister has spoke about how he sees farmers like Helen as the champions of the change that he would love to see the direction of agriculture going. The food strategy, I guess, is great, but you need to see proper planning, and that's where we're at too in terms of policy and seeing it go forward. You need to see that there's very ambitious language used, and we're hearing a lot of that, and I'm not complaining. That's great to hear, but I want to see how that's going to happen. I want to see budgetary allocation for the next 10 years. How are you going to achieve these things on this strategy for farmers and land workers? How are they going to know they can actually make their farm plan to fit with this, and what's coming down the road for them in terms of support and in terms of actual tangible interaction with government and in achieving those goals and that ambitious language?
Very good. I have to say I was never much into policy side of things, and having got involved with the Nature Friendly Farming Network, I've kind of had to pay attention to some of the sort of government and policy work, and I've learned an awful lot from working with NFFN on that. With my enterprise and innovation hat on, it's really frustratingly slow how things happen, and particularly in Northern Ireland, it's worth saying, we have had long periods where we've had no government. We've had long periods where we've had a fairly dysfunctional government. There is a real frustration around, let's just do stuff, for goodness sake. We can't wait any longer. We have to just get stuff done now. It's been far too long that things haven't been happening. Cormac's 100% right. We're in a much happier position now, I think, than we have been in a while. I don't mind saying that. We've got, a minister who's been really had a listening ear for us, which has been great. So I'm hoping that we will see some real proper change now, and I think that would be really good. But in the meantime, we just have to get on and do stuff. Yeah. We can't wait for it. We just have to get on and do stuff on our farms with each other, collaborating, and show them how it's done. Really.
Yeah. Brilliant. Any other questions?
Probably don't. Okay. Thank you all for it's just been lovely, and I love the photos. I think it's just really nice to have something so beautiful to look at. But in light of what you've just been talking about, and it is a bit particular to Beth, your example of the greengrocers, is thinking about sharing resources, about how you actually do it, as in that kind of, nuts and bolts, the bad parts of it all, of having those kind of resources available to other people who might like to start their own greengrocers, and that I think there's space for something that's quite, here are the core principles, and then here are the things you have to think about in your own context. I'm sure if I set one up in Cork, it would look slightly different to what you did, but a lot of it would be very similar. Yeah. And I'm wondering if that's, I realise you have about 7 jobs already, so I'm not saying you have to do this, but maybe there is a way that it can be done so that resource becomes available and people can add to it or adapt it, and that we might see more of these. But I agree, not a scaling up. It's not that you want to have 25 greengrocers, but that there is one in as many communities as maybe want them, and that it's that initial step is so bloody scary, I think, of where do I start? And you know, it could be called with tea and buns. I'm all open for that.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if that's maybe in the pipeline, and I don't mean to put you under pressure to do it.
So we have a website, and on our website we still share publicly our original business plan and our share offer document, and that's kind of really available. And I did have somebody say to me like, "Oh, are you not worried people will copy it?" It's like, no, that'd be great. You know, so there's lots of stuff in there just about kind of how we did things and why we took some decisions, and that's there. We have like everybody has a blog. It's probably about once a year that I manage to kind of carve out a couple of hours and write something. But we had our first AGM in September, and I took that as an opportunity to kind of write our annual report. Which was a little bit, not warts and all, but certainly like kind of all the steps we took, and probably was a bit more erring on the completely positive than this was really hard and it sucked. But I'll certainly, I don't know, we're going to see you tomorrow. I can share that, and that's on the website as well. So there's but that's not quite it. That stuff isn't quite it. But also like a toolkit isn't it either. There's something about, I think, a lot of it is just, it would be over tea and buns. And I think that for cooperative alternatives in Northern Ireland, kind of that's one of their ambitions, is that there's a few people able to kind of take organisations, or take groups, not organisations, on this kind of slow journey. That work, probably from Cooperatives UK as well, is so vastly under-resourced, is especially under-resourced in Northern Ireland. So Tiziana, I think, did years of work with us and was paid hundreds of pounds. Yeah. So there's so much is being, like for all of us, and all of the work we're doing is being done on the backs of volunteerism, right? I mean, that's writ large. But I'll take it away and have we think about it. But it's not there's not a neat answer. I don't think it is conversation as bonds. Yeah.
Follow up
yeah.
Online.
Okay.
Can you remind us what the governance? I think you've just answered this, but can you remind us what the governance model of the Greengrocers is? Is it a community benefit society or a cooperative? You've just actually also offered it, that it's online.
Yes, so carrickgreengrocers.org is the website. It's a community benefit society, which is a type of cooperative. But a community benefit society is the kind of on our governing document. That's what we are.
Okay, and the last one from Emma. If land is relatively cheaper in Northern Ireland, there's a big opportunity for new entrants to start micro farming or market gardens. How can we jump on that opportunity now before land prices rise?
The average price of an acre in North Ireland is about 30% more than
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that, fortunately that's ill informed.
Yeah.
We're coming over here.
Yeah.
I'm running how many seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we've got 5 minutes left. Probably do one more question if we have one. Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Can we just for the people online? Thank you.
I guess I just want to add my perspective of, like, from our point of view as Northern Ireland farmers in the audience, and I'd say the sort of regen space that we're in is actually very positive in Northern Ireland, and sort of if you try to strike up a conversation with a conventional farmer at home, you have to think negative. You talk what if bad things happening, and it's all, you know, doom and gloom. That's sort of, we're united by that almost, but in this kind of space, it's all positive. And I think you mentioned about Andrew Muir at the Fields Good Festival. Actually, he was there, and he stood up and said, "This was weird. This is the most positive farming thing I've ever been to. Nobody's attacking me." I think that's sort of, you're asking what does Northern Ireland need, but I think we just need to keep doing whatever we're doing. It is a very small space, but I mean, I'm on a next gen regen program funded by this guy in front of me, and it's pretty cool. All the pictures going across. I'm like, oh, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy. Like, we're at the beginning of something, and it is changing. And I think it's a good space to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely.
I'll jump on that. Thanks for that. I think that's a lovely thing to sort of finish on. But when it comes to Feels Good, we maybe didn't mention that enough. That was Northern Ireland's first regenerative agriculture festival, sort of inspired by groundswell that you have here, and it went really, really well. I think this year couldn't have went better. I don't think so. Hoping that that'll be happening again this year in September. So if anybody does want to come over and visit, that's a good time. Good time to do it.
It's a good opportunity.
And I'd also like to say, if anybody wants to come and interact with anybody from the Nature Friendly Farming Network, we're having a meet and greet in Checkers later this evening at 5:30 onwards. So feel free to come along and we can talk about anything more you want to talk to any of our farmers too.
Brilliant.
We've got a wee email sheet here if anybody wants to stay in touch with us. We'll gather in all the post-its and we'll get those kind of typed up. And so if you want to share your email address, and we can share those back with you. I'm dashing off now to do another session, but just want to say I'm going to put on here the Food Ethics Council, my first hat, is running something called the Food Issues Census, which is an opportunity to share our sector's needs and opportunities with funders and with each other, and tell our stories about kind of what's really happening, how it is for us all right now in the work that we're doing. So I'll put a couple of those there, and there's a QR code, but would really encourage as many of you as possible to fill in the census if you would. And other than that,
can you leave your post-its here on your way out?
And you can grab another bun if you want to for your travels.
Take a tray, take a jammy joey if you haven't had a jammy.
Yeah, the jammy joeys are on touch.
And listen, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Remember